What's up, everybody? Circus here in a video marathon with Kamel. What's up? How you doing, buddy?
I am doing good. Glad to be banging out some content.
Yeah, that's right. So we just got talking, excuse me, off screen about XZs versus Synchros, basically. And I was saying, with chronomalies coming out and gimmick puppets and automats, all these XZs archetypes, it seems like they do what they do well, right? Like you can get to the point where you can summon out your XZ's monster, and depending on what you go into, that depends on how good your deck is. But at the same time, it doesn't seem like they're very good when you compare it to something like a synchro deck where they can go into a synchro and then kind of like ladder up into the next synchro, which has effects, and like resonators are a good one, right? Like you bring the first one
Right.
out, you gain life points, and you bring the next one out, and then you can pop a card on the field, and then you bring out your boss monster. I mean, there's like a lot of stuff going on, and you're really messing with your opponent. Whereas it feels like automat, or maybe not automats, but like uh, these XZs archetypes, you just bring out your your boss monster, and hopefully it has a good effect, right? I mean,
Mhm.
Automats for a little bit had that where it could go into Exabeetle, into Rhino Bus, and it's like, all right, now we're talking. But they're like, nope, we're done with that. It's like, it seems like they have a very low power level, and they're just like intentionally keeping them there.
Yeah, I think. Well, you said something really good. Synchro versus Xyz, right? And Xyz have a really the Xyz decks, I should say, have a big power play issue
Mm-hmm.
right now. The monsters are not very generally powerful. Within archetypes specifically, talk about gimmick puppets, talk about chronomalies. Those Xyz monsters are nice, but their effects are kind of gimmicky. They kind of rely on you summoning a monster and activating its effect right away. They're not really to the point where, you're getting resources back, you're doing stuff on your opponent's turn, you're doing quick effects. And that's partially because of um, when these cards were released and how powerful they are. And the fact that we have only gotten cards around the same power level is is by design for Duel
Right.
Links, right? Uh, and this is not even something that we're seeing for the first time. It happened with Synchros as well. If you were playing the game in 2018 when Synchros came out, you would know there were no good Synchro decks for many months, almost the whole year. It was not until Six Samurai came out later on that really just blew open the meta for Synchros. I believe a similar thing has happened this time with Xyz. For the first several months of Xyz era, which started last September, we were not even getting components for Xyz decks at that point. We were getting an Xyz monster here, Diamond Direwolf over there,
Right.
some wind ups, just little itty bits and pieces. And that's not good enough for several months. And after you go several months with just that, when it does come to the full Xyz decks coming out in the box, a new character, their skill, getting box support, they have what they need for their archetype to succeed. But then when it comes to them needing generally good Xyz monsters to go into to deliver powerful effects, well, we have some, but not every deck can utilize Photon Strike Bouncer, Ptolemy M7, Abyss Dweller. Not every deck makes those Xyz monsters and uses them efficiently. So our card pool for good Xyz monsters is very low, and that's why any new Xyz deck that comes out is kind of dead on arrival because there's only so much you can do, right? Perfect example, Chronomalies just came out. The Chronomaly skills that you're allowed to use, one of them restricts you to only light numbers and Chronomalies. So you get a very consistent deck, but you are limited to whatever light numbers and Chronomalies Konami have released. And what do you know? The only light numbers and Chronomalies Konami have released are Dyson Sphere, number 18, and the Chronomalies. All three of them have extremely situational effects, none which are generally useful in most games. Dyson Sphere is probably the best one of those. And then you have the Chronomalies, which we did not even get their full smorgasbord of original Xyz monsters. They had to limit. They couldn't even give us one of them because I guess they thought it was too much. The other skill does allow you to go into more generally useful Xyz monsters. It does not have an extra deck restriction, but you can see that Chronomalies is kind of tailored so that you get the best version of the deck, the playable one that's going to be very consistent when you limit yourself to only using these very strange, gimmicky Xyz monsters and being forced to play around that. Saw a similar thing with Gimmick Puppets. And I use these two options specifically because they're probably the two fullest Xyz decks that are an actual archetype. Before we've seen stuff like the water deck,
Mhm.
automats is obvious, why they pop off. But automats did not always pop off, right?
Right.
Automats used to be in the situation where these decks are now, Chronomaly and Gimmick Puppets. They're locked to just their own Xyz monsters, and they can't make use of powerful, quick effect Xyz monsters or Xyz monsters that actively interrupt your opponent at different times during the duel. And yeah, they're suffering right now because of that. Look how good Automat started doing when they took advantage of Photon Strike Bouncer and Constellar Ptolemy M7. Those cards put them on the map because those are generally useful Xyz monsters that Automats can make in one turn with just two cards.
Now,
Chronomalies and Gimmick Puppets unable to do that.
when I was watching tournament footage, I
Mm-hmm.
noticed I was watching Chronomaly, and I'm like, I saw them do their plays, and I'm like, how is this any different than Gimmick Puppets? Besides the names and the pictures on the cards, I'm
Yep.
like, this plays exactly the same, and they all kind of play exactly the same. Whereas like, I'd like to see more hybrid decks and like Harpies. I'm thinking of because like it synchros real well, but then you can also XZs if you want to.
Yeah.
I'd like to see more of that, I guess, because I don't know. You were talking about powerful synchro monsters. I'm just thinking Cyber Slash Harpy Lady. She's got a
Yeah.
great quick
Cyber says
effect.
Harpwitty.
But then you
Perfect
can go into
example.
like Malevolent Sin on your next turn if you have to. I mean, there's
Mm-hmm.
like, I think that's like probably a better style of deck to go into in the future. Something that can do a
Yeah.
little bit of
Part of the
everything.
part of the issue, and a lot of people say this a lot when new cards are announced, right? Is that a lot of the Xyz monster cards that we're getting right now are very dated, right?
Hmm.
A lot of them are very, very old, and the new support that does clean up some of their issues is typically deemed too powerful for dueling. So with Chronomaly and Gimmick Puppets both there, both decks from the beginning of Xyz monsters in the TCG when like the first year or two. So naturally, their effects are different than that of an Xyz monster that has been around only for a couple years. Those Xyz decks from that generation are typically focused around making sure that you always have monsters to Xyz summon. That your hand is always full of resources. You're always going to be able to put 3 monsters out in the field to make an Xyz monster. You have a bunch of effect monsters that are just like special summon, special summon, special summon, that typically. And then your Xyz monster is supposed to capitalize off
Right.
of, you having all these monsters readily available and they just do some powerful effect once per turn.
I guess I'm
Boom.
just thinking like you don't see combo XZ's decks yet, and I know it took a while for like
Right.
Shiranui combo Shiranui to come out, and
Mhm.
I don't know if you want to count Resonators as kind of like a combo deck, but like I don't feel like the decks move or do things. You know what I mean? Like when you watch Resonators or like combo Shiranui, the deck's always in action. It's always flowing, and it's like they're using
Yeah.
monster effects to get things done. They're not relying on back row to carry the deck, and
Mhm.
XZ's just doesn't have that. It just feels like the decks just feel slower and is not as exciting to watch than some of the synchro
Right.
decks that we have. And I know that the synchro decks we have are probably further down the line, like you were saying, than the
Right.
XZ's monsters we have now.
That's a good point. A lot of people also say, it's the first year of Xyz summoning, so we're not going to have access to all that stuff. But it needs to come, man, because one of the problems we're seeing is the couple decks that do have that power are just so overwhelmingly better than everything else. And that I think is the issue of why, they need to bring some of the power to these other archetypes because they're just overall weak. They don't have the powerful effects and synchros. They've been through that already for their first year. And like you said, it wasn't until probably around like the year after where we started seeing Shiranui, and the text with other decks and stuff like that.
So hopefully this next year, XZ's will get it better. I'm not saying they're crap. I
Right.
know a lot of people probably think we're just completely shitting on them, but it's more like
Yeah.
um, where are we at with the game? I just had that thought pop in my head when I was doing a tournament video the other day, and I'm like,
No, definitely.
what's the
Like,
difference between chronomalies and gimmick puppets? They just feel like they're the same thing,
they have the same issues. But
you know?
I do believe once we get pendulums and they feel like they can diversify the meta ecosystem
Mhm.
a little bit more, then they'll start to those more powerful Xyz monsters.
I,
Because
I want to
I
see
think
like a
the one
combo in XZ's deck. That's what I want to see,
right.
you know?
Well, yeah. Typically, the all of the decks we have access to now, all of them are from the original run of Yu-Gi-Oh! Zexal. So
Right.
I kind of see why they're all lacking in
A little
power,
bit slower.
but they've definitely screwed us of some opportunities where we could have had some some real big decks in the meta.
Well, then this should be pretty exciting coming into the next year because we're gonna
That's
have
what I think. That's what I'm looking
better
forward to the
XE's
most.
decks, right? We're gonna have pendulums,
Right.
and maybe we can get more into these hybrid decks, like I was talking about before, like you see with harpies. I'm sure there's other decks. I'm just got harpies on the brain here, where you can synchro, you can go into your XZs, things like that. I'd like to be able to see, pendulum synchro XZs or whatever, like all into one. It'd be great to see the plays just kind of flow like that. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see what Konami gives us over the next year.
Definitely. It's going to be rough. It's going to be another rough year. Introducing two summoning mechanics in a row. Pendulums are, it's going to be interesting what their part to play in Duel Links will be because, Z's arguably, they have not been fleshed out. So it'll be interesting to see how they prioritize which summoning mechanic with card releases.
Right. All right, guys, let us know what you think of the first year of XZs. I know we talked about it a little bit before, but like I said, just watching that Chronomaly game, and I'm like, why did they even release this deck when we already have gimmick puppets?
Yeah, they
So
could have just released. They could have released them much closer to each other.
or
I
something.
feel
Yeah, I
like
don't know. Let us know what you think about just XZs in general. Synchros. What's your favorite summoning mechanic? What makes the game fun? I like the comboing synchro decks, I guess. I think that's just a more fun mechanic right now. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Make sure you're getting our Discord because it's free. The terms are free, and the new player help is free. My name's Circus. That's Kamel.
peace out.
We'll see you next time.